Good evening, Brendan Corrigan.
Oliver Pritchard, well, that was just a delightful little intro there, wasn't it? That's put me in the festive mood. I wasn't really feeling it, but now I should be wearing my Santa Claus hat. It was wonderful.
I was very impressed too. Although I do also quite want a Coca-Cola now.
Yeah, well, I mean, there wouldn't be Christmas without Coca-Cola, really. The two of them go hand in hand, don't they? How have you been? We were missing last week, Ollie, and I go into details, not into great detail, but a little bit of detail as to why we were missing last week. But how have you been these last couple of weeks?
Yeah, it's been the usual chaos at the end of the semester, but apart from that, yeah, everything's lined up nicely.
So you are all set for the Christmas, and of course there is a Christmas theme to our show tonight. We even have a Santa's goodie bag, but more on that in a bit. I just do want a cautionary tale, perhaps, Ollie, and I doubt there are many people wishing to go to Venezuela, many foreigners, I should say, as in non-Venezuelan foreigners in Colombia right now wishing to go to Venezuela. But unbeknownst to me, I did have to do a border run in the end, or at least attempt one, as I was awaiting an answer from La Cancelleria for my latest visa application, which I can now thankfully say has been approved. So I've bought myself another year in the country. But before that was approved, I had to make sure that I was in a regular or legal state, as we would say, in the country. Tried to cross into Venezuela, and they are not letting. And as I said, unbeknownst to me and also to our embassy here in Bogotá, they had no idea. And you like this, Ollie, as a proud British man, and a man who's accepted Brexit with open arms. Our new consul in Bogotá, replacing the great Maurice Nolan, who's moved on. But I was writing to her just saying, I'm at the Venezuelan border and they're telling me that I cannot cross, even though I've got my exit stamp from Colombia. And she's going, oh, well, as far as we're aware, Irish people can enter Venezuela. I said, well, you can say that to the two Migración police here in the Venezuelan border. They're not letting me in. And then she said, well, I said, you like this. When's Ireland's exit from the EU? She goes, oh, let me check with my European colleagues. So I thought it was the Republic of Ireland, a republic in name, but maybe not in nature by the looks of things. Anyway, so that's the story. You can't cross it. Yeah.
That is one of the positive points of Brexit. A united Ireland is now much more likely.
Well, yeah, we'll see what happens on that one. But just to finish the point, so you can't cross into Venezuela by land. I believe if you fly in, you might get in. But if you wanted to go by land, you would need a visa or be a Venezuelan citizen or whatever. Now, I have to say, the two Venezuelan migration police officers were very friendly. They're actually now WhatsApp buddies. We exchange numbers and everything, so which is a rarity for Colombian authorities, I must say. But anyway, so a word to the wise, if you're looking to do a border run overland into Venezuela, you can't do it right now, but that could change in a month. Who knows? These things are very fluid at this moment in time. But also, not to do with the pandemic, apparently. The female officer there told me that this has been in place since 2019. I think it's all to do with Guaido and stuff like that. So anyway, Venezuela, a law unto itself. But I'm a little bit disappointed that I didn't get into the country. I was technically 48 hours in no man's land, Ollie. But anyway, I'm back in Bogotá, as you can see, with my new Cúcuta jersey. But we'll explain more on that later when we get to the second half of the show. Well, we have a little look ahead of what is coming up in that second half of the show. Because while Colombian gifts, guys, are not specifically just for Christmas, but with the big gift-giving season upon us tonight on Bogotá Nights, we'll be unwrapping some of our favourite treats from this fair country. For many foreigners here, a trip back to their homeland usually means taking with them some Colombian coffee. I know I always do. Now, if that's you, is there a specific brand you recommend? Outside of Cafe Plus, of course, and more on that in a second. How about more exotic options, such as hormigas, culonas, those being big-bummed, edible ants to the uninitiated, a delicacy in the Santander department. Those Santanderianos will eat anything. Outside of such culinary delights, is there apparel that you are particularly attached to from these parts, as I do like my Colombian football shirts? Whatever your go-to Colombian gift is, we want to hear about it. Get in touch with us right now by using the live comment facility, and I see we already have a few messages in, and your messages will appear here on screen. If you are watching this recorded, you can still get involved by commenting on where you're viewing or via tweet. That's always open, the handle being at Bogotá Post, everybody's favourite English language newspaper in Colombia, with the hashtag, the name of this show, Bogotá Nights. And to celebrate our prescient present discussion, with thanks to the very generous people at the aforementioned Cali-based Cafe Plus, with the hashtag Brewing Change, we've got a little goodie bag to give away from them, a prize that can be delivered to anywhere in Colombia. So even if you're listening in Leticia or up in Barranquilla, we can get you that prize. Stay tuned for details on how you can win that top treat just after 9:30 in the second half of the show. First, though, while we may be entering silly season in terms of news here, plenty has happened over the last couple of weeks since we were last with you. Ollie, the party of the incumbent president Ivan Duque, Centro Democrático, has shown its presidential hand for next year's election. Oscar Zuluaga, an exciting choice. I know you're fully behind this one, Ollie.
Yeah, he's exciting like Coldplay, or white toast, or porridge, but porridge made with just water and no sugar. Actually, I quite like that, but it's not interesting. And yeah, he's a dull candidate, and I think actually they really haven't read the room on this one. I think, Colombian politics often feels that it's contemptuous of the voting base, that it's, these behind closed doors acuerdos, made without recourse to the voting public, where it's more about influence and jockeying and playing a kind of courtly game among the sort of elite classes. And that's exactly what this looks like. It looks like it's Zuluaga's turn, so he gets a turn. Now, whatever you might think of Ivan Duque and his time in power, he was an interesting choice. He was a young buck. He was a new Turk. He was he's a senator that had just burst onto the scene with some creative and interesting ideas. Now, we can argue for a long time about whether or not, he achieved any of those. But Zuluaga is very much looking back to the past. And this is reflective of the whole election, if we're honest. We've got Zuluaga again. He's a former presidential campaigner, a loser, mired in controversy. We've got Petro again. We've got Peñalosa still around. We've got Fajardo again. So we're kind of going back on the same ground. Again, there's nothing new here, nothing particularly interesting. And it's surprising because, the rest of Latin America over the last few years has been sort of shifting towards sort of newer candidates, not necessarily younger, but newer. If you look at Chile, for example, we've got Cast and the student leader, one of whom is young, the other of whom isn't so young, but he's a kind of new force in politics. Seems like a very strange decision from the Centro Democrático, and I think it's one that could give them a bit of a shock in the spring.
Yeah, I guess if you associate the Centro Democrático with kind of risk-taking and bold, the party of Uribe, the party for the kind of the Colombian pueblo, and representation of a more conservative Colombia, perhaps. Oscar Zuluaga, he seems a bit stale. We can all have our kind of jokes about Maria Fernanda Calal, who was the other one in the running, and a dearth of women really going for this election as things stand. But she would have brought, a bit of excitement to it, let's be honest. Certainly a lot of uncertainty. That's about the one certain thing we know about her. What would she come out with? again, may not go down well, as we talked about in previous episodes. I think in the previous one a couple of weeks ago, she wouldn't get those floating voters. Zuluaga is kind of your safe pair of hands, but let's be honest, there's nothing too exciting coming out. Well, I say safe pair of hands for the party faithful, perhaps. But again, if you're a floating voter, you're kind of going, like he's got a Richard Nixon-esque kind of vibe to him. Kind of like, I don't know.
You mentioned this, and of course, complete with the phone hacking controversy.
From the previous in 2014, wasn't it, when he ran off against Santos? Exactly. Yeah, so it's kind of a bit disappointing, put it that way. But because of the party he's behind and what that represents, like, he's obviously in with more than a fair chance of pulling this off. I guess we'll have to see who he's up against and things like that. And by the way, plenty of comments coming in, and you can send in your gift comments as well, and we'll come back to them when we're talking about the gifts. But as David Allen Simmons says, Zuluaga, well, of course, Centro Democrático weren't behind the peace process as was Santos's peace, as they like to call it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest. But to be honest, everyone was forced into that by, Santos's running point in that election was simply, let me get peace done. I'm the man who can get peace done. No one else can do it. So I guess everyone was forced to stand kind of against peace in that respect. And David Allen Simmons as well here mentioning Peru. Now that's almost an even more interesting situation than Chile. Of course, Peru, we saw a rural school teacher pop up really from almost nowhere, an avowed Marxian, not a Marxist, but a Marxian, popped out, pretty much out of nowhere and absolutely romped to victory. It's surprising that something like that hasn't happened in Colombia. You would think it would be fertile ground. People regularly talk about how much they're disappointed, turned off by the political system. Turnout is rarely over 50%. Seems strange no one's capitalized on that.
But do you mean from the left or like from either side, left or right?
Either. I mean, the closest thing you have really to somebody who really whips up passion and fervor is Gustavo Petro.
Yeah, and of course, again, if we're talking about, he's been there, done that, and he's running yet again. Just to stick on this theme, we had the Coalición de Centro Esperanza, so like the center ground of hope, in a sense, this coalition of hope, which Sergio Fajardo is part of. Peñalosa isn't. He's in another cabal. I don't know what group he calls himself. Yeah, it's all kind of getting a bit confusing. But this group came out and they had a previous name, and now they've come out with this new name, Coalición Centro Esperanza. And they announced like there was 6 men on the ticket, and then it was like an afterthought. It's like, oops, we don't have a woman on this, so we should get a woman involved. And then like 24 hours later, apparently they approached Ingrid Betancourt and Claudia Lopez's wife, Robledo, and Angela. Betancourt said no apparently, but Robledo said, well, hasn't given a clear answer. But again, when it's like an afterthought, they weren't thinking, or they just thought, let's go with this job.
And again, it's so uninspiring, isn't it? You can't imagine it, driving somebody. You can't imagine people running out to going, yes, yes, we can. There's none of that. It's very much, we're going to get a Joe Biden victor. And by the way, I'm really interested, if we have any Americans watching, I'm really interested in this idea because, of course, the Colombian presidential election runs like the American presidential election was originally envisaged, that there should be no parties. And I'm always quite unsure about how I feel about that. On the one hand, I feel like if there aren't any parties, I don't really know what. Like I can know about somebody's character, but I don't really know about their politics. And especially people like, say, Enrique Peñalosa, just flip flop about, between sort of different positions. That they're very chameleon like. I'd be interested to think if Americans think, it's the fact that they're all essentially independents. Is that a positive or is that a negative? Of course, in our countries, we've got very clearly defined party lines. I find the Colombian system very interesting because of that.
Yeah, well, David Allen Simmons is quick in there saying, well, that in the US now, of course, party is everything. But again, some people would say, well, I guess it depends what line of the Democratic Party and what line of the Republican Party. Those closer to the centre and obviously on each side are closer in ideology, but then you swing to the left in the Democrats and to the right in the Republicans. But yeah, that is true here. You maybe don't know what you're getting with these candidates, but one thing a lot of them have in common is that they're all kind of maybe from the same kind of social class, Ollie.
Well, this is where Petro does again stand out.
Yeah, that's. But again, as we've said on many occasions, it won't be a vote. He won't be a vote getter in certain constituencies. Anyway, whoever the final list of candidates heading into what is the first runoff in May, will they be facing a load of strikes from FECODE, which is the Federación Colombia of the Educación, so the group representing teachers and stuff. So they've walked away from talks with the Ministry of Education, not happy, broken promises from August, surprise, surprise. So they've said, ongoing protest. Will we see them early next year, once we get Christmas out of the way, February, March? Or will people just wait and say, let's see who's going to be in Casa de Nariño and let's negotiate with them? What do you think?
Yeah, there's kind of two schools of thought on this. Do you sort of, because it's clever, that, isn't it? Two schools of thought there that, what one side kind of says, yeah, let's kick off a ruckus now and see if we can force politicians to agree with us. The other side kind of says, would it be more sensible to try and line yourself up with somebody, put your support behind them? What I would say about this is that FECODE aren't really very powerful, which makes sense. It's not like, teachers in Colombia haven't produced good educational returns historically. They're in a very weak negotiating position. Colombia's PISA results on international league tables of education are appalling. So when sort of teachers sit around saying, oh, well, we might go off on strike, I think Colombia's got every right to say, go on then. You're not delivering a great deal of education. It doesn't really make a difference whether you're in the classroom or not. So they're in a fairly weak position on that. I also think, strikes are more likely to benefit sort of right-wing conservative parties who are less likely to give FECODE any benefits. So they would be staggeringly stupid to be kicking off demonstrations before the elections, I think.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean they won't do it. I'm just pointing out it would be a very stupid move.
FECODE, if you're looking for advice, consultancy, Ollie, for free, is telling you, just hold tight because you might be just endorsing the status quo and nothing will change if you do go on strike early next year, but we'll see. Speaking of education and pedagogical events, there was one in Tuluá in Valle de Cauca a couple of weeks ago, Ollie. The police decided to have a cultural event, I guess, to show their officers various parts of the world and what's popular and what's not. It didn't go down too well, the idea to represent parts of certain areas of Europe with the Nazi uniform. I can't imagine what was wrong with that, Ollie.
I don't know. You'll have to ask the Duke of Sussex. Is he Sussex? I get a bit confused with all of them, but yeah, good old Prince Harry. I mean, at least these Colombian officers, have ignorance as an excuse.
And they're not related to the Germans.
Yeah, no, and they're not actually German. Well, neither's Harry, famously. But anyway. Yeah, look, I think I don't think there's any particular malice here. I think, let's remember that education of the Holocaust often isn't great in Colombia because it doesn't necessarily need to be in the way that it does in Europe, where, the scars are very, very much still visible. So I guess, look, we do need to sort of remember that these, the people who did the organisation, it's a stupid and crass thing to do, but it is the sort of thing, that people do, especially coming from a point of ignorance. I think what's really interesting about this is to contrast it. Every Halloween, for example, there'll be some gringos dressing up somewhere as Pablo Escobar, and there'll be the usual kind of outraged voices going, "Oh, isn't this terrible representing Colombia like this?" Well, you can't have it both ways if you don't also call out, Nazi costumes at a police event. I would also say, though, particularly with the police, you would think, the police and military, you would think that their close ties with Israel would be something that would kind of keep them on the straight and narrow there. But anyway, we'll see.
Yeah, and of course it was met, unsurprisingly, with a quick rebuke from both the German and the Israeli embassies. But again, as you said, a lot of ignorance. Like, I remember, I may have told this story before, and I remember I wrote a blog story on it a few years ago, but like these strange Nazi connections. And again, like, do they fully know the history? Like, obviously, if Adolf Hitler and his ilk were ruling the world today, the Latinos aren't exactly the ones that they'd have as their right-hand men and women. But there was a bar I used to frequent in the centre, and I gave it the title the Nazi bar because the young owner, he was in his early 20s, had a Nazi swastika on his hand, a tattoo of a Nazi swastika on his hand. Again, like, I mean, as far away from a Nazi as you can get. I mean, he was quite, well, anyway, your typical Nazi, whatever, but he certainly wasn't. But just, again, ignorance, as we said, a lot of it is just down to that plain ignorance. Anyway, Ollie, we were talking the last... just see a comment there from David Allen Simmons about education, which I guess is interesting. He's saying that kids have already lost at least a year of proper education, and certainly you could say those from the poorer neighbourhoods, that's definitely the case, without the right equipment for home learning and whatever. If we're faced with more strikes,
but let's not worry too much. I mean, as we said before, PISA results for Colombia seem to indicate that for poorer kids, there isn't a massive amount of difference being made between receiving schooling and not receiving schooling.
No, in fairness, and I made that point during the early days of the pandemic, and people know my views on lockdowns and things like that. And, I was saying, think of the damage being done to children, and then I kind of qualified that by going, well, maybe those, yes, in the poorer neighbourhoods, they might learn a little bit more staying at home and learning from mommy and daddy or whatever, or just learning on the street. But obviously, there are other criminal elements and things like that in particular neighbourhoods that could become quite problematic. Anyway, we were talking before we move on quickly onto sport. And by the way, keep your comments coming in about gifts for Colombia, what your favourite gifts are. Do you have any kind of unusual gift that you like to get? Or Colombians also, vice versa. If you have foreign friends here and they're going back to the UK or to the United States or to Canada or New Zealand, Australia, India, wherever, do you like them to come back with something from those countries that you can't get here? Let us know about that. And we've got our top prize to give away from Cafe Plus. But vaccination certs, Ollie, I was in Cúcuta for a number of days, as I said at the top of the show. And just one bar was very visual. They had a sign up saying, it's obligatory, and they had like a little chain across the door, so there was somebody checking your vaccine cert. But it was one, and the only one that I noticed that was asking for vaccination certs. Here in Bogotá, I haven't gone to any really fancy establishment to test it.
Funny you should mention that, Brendan, because David Allen Simmons has really dropped, has really name dropped something here. He's saying that at a cocktail reception at Teatro Mayor, presidential candidates, including Peñalosa, were there. No proof of vaccination requested. It's not clear what kind of event it was. He's not saying whether or not it's a bar or some sort of event that would be exempt from the regulations already. Who knows? Turns out that my Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he had a Christmas party apparently last year when no one else was allowed to, but that's okay because actually it was just a bit of champagne after doing some work, which seems literally unbelievable given that he's a known liar and doesn't do much work. Certainly, though, I'd have to agree with you, Brendan. Here in Bogotá, I went to a bar on Monday evening. I had honestly completely forgotten about the vaccination regulations. There was no sign of them on the door. We weren't asked. Yeah, nothing there. Haven't seen anything, really. I mean, I haven't seen signs up. I haven't been stopped going into shops. Yeah, nothing really. It's almost like it doesn't exist.
I might be excommunicated from the Irish community. This is the second time I'm going to have well, it's not a negative word in the Irish Embassy, but I just got an email this afternoon from the Irish Embassy, and they're hosting a little Christmas gathering for 2 hours. Now, if it only goes on for 2 hours, I will be shocked. But it's at El Irish in Usaken, and in bold red text, you do not from your vaccination cert. I won't.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think I froze there for a while. As people said before, I haven't got back in at this moment in time, and so I'll begin. Just to mention a story from a Canadian friend of mine here. He popped into one of Valdez Faye, and he doesn't have the vaccine either. And then said, "Have you got your vaccine cert?" And he was just turning away and going like, "No, I don't have it." And the woman goes, "Oh no, it's okay. We can still serve you. We're paying for it." But anyway, that seemed a bit strange. Why bother to ask for it in the first place? But anyway, we'll keep an eye on it and see how it goes. By the way, what's David Allen Simmons saying about Beethoven's Ninth followed? So, obviously some concerts that this was.
Well, it is a teatro, so you would think that.
Oh yes, it's Teatro Mayor. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Are you there? Yeah,
I'm still there. So on to the football.
In and out here.
On to the football, maybe.
Yeah, onto the football. Yeah, sorry, Ollie. Yeah, it's just my connection was going in and out. Yeah, a friend of this show, Carol Warswick, has been tweeting that a number of football clubs in club engaging for blacklisting certain players, those who have the cheek of looking for better conditions and better pay. What's the story? Will I plug in my laptop here?
Yeah, absolutely unacceptable. So nearly half the league has been caught putting players on blacklists. So, just to be clear, by blacklist we mean a list of players who are known trouble causers and won't be hired. Meaning that basically, let's say that a player kicks off at his club and says, "I don't like the conditions that I'm being hired under. You're not paying me enough. etc., 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 the club will make sure that other clubs don't offer him a place in the squad. Pretty disgusting, really, 2021. Can you hear us there, Brendan? No, I think we might have lost him there. Anyway, pretty...
I think I'm back. Yeah, I'm getting a sign here.
So just to clear up, this is... it's 16 of the 35 professional teams in Colombia, and 2 ex-presidents of Di Mayor, the Football Association of Colombia. So pretty worrying stuff, frankly. Have we lost?
Oh yeah, okay. No. I think we're back, and I hope it lasts now. It's been going in and out. Usually, I technically leave Colombia for 48 hours, but I didn't, and I still have the same problems. I thought a reboot on my stay in the country might work, but anyway, I'll get to the bottom of this. 2022 can't come quick enough. But yeah, so I take it you gave a good overview of that blacklisting of players. Our favourite now, he's taken over from James Rodriguez, Luis Lucho Diaz, the Guajiro superstar, and he's in demand. And I saw Blue Radio today with a headline that Liverpool are leading the chasing pack, that maybe the January transfer window he could be on his way to the Premier League. It's been a bit of a graveyard for Colombian stars, though, of late, hasn't it? The Premier League. Maybe he should avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, since the days of the halcyon days of Faustino Asprilla, Juan Pablo Angel, and Hugo Rodallega, a legendary player for Wigan, Hamilton Ricard. At Middlesbrough, people often forget him. Rather unkindly monikered Hamilton Retard. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see Liverpool make an offer in January. Remember, of course, they're losing Mane and Salah for the African Cup of Nations, and of course, God knows what's happening with the African Cup of Nations, given the whole COVID situation, of course, in Africa. It's going to complicate things massively if players have to do a sort of 2-week quarantine coming home, if flights are suddenly dropped, etc. So, yeah, hard to know what's going to happen.
Yeah, okay. Well, just quickly give a quick mention to, we mentioned this 2 weeks ago, there were rumours and now it's official, Jose Pekerman, the grandfather of international football, a legend of Colombia these days, but now he's with the rivals next door in Venezuela, and of course it makes that final game of the qualifiers for the World Cup even more intriguing. That will be played, I'm guessing they're probably going to play it in San Cristobal. That's where they've been playing the last few games, with Colombia and Venezuela. But Pekerman in charge of Los Vinotintos, so that's an interesting move. Anyway, Ollie, time is cracking on, and with my tech problems here, thanks David Allen Simmons, I did call the tech squad, but I don't know who exactly is in charge of it. Just to wrap up on a comment, Angela has been in touch just on the news story on about the vaccine certs, not at all requested in the Eje Cafetero, where she was last week, but her brother has been asked some burger places in Chia. It seems to be hit and miss, really depends on the owners of the venues, and it doesn't seem like there are too many authorities keeping an eye on it. Anyway, Christmas gifts, that's what we're getting on to, Colombian Christmas gifts, and gifts in general, because, as I said at the top of the show, it's not just for Christmas. Colombian gifts are for life. So, what are your favourite gifts? Now, Ollie, will we give it another 10 minutes or so before we give away our quiz question? Let's give it another. Yeah, we still have 25 minutes left or so of the show, so let's keep that in reserve. We've got a little goodie bag from our proud sponsors. They've been very good to this show. Actually, they've given us about 3 or 4 different prizes through the last year and a half or so we've been doing this show. Cafe Plus, which the hashtag brewing change, all their profits go back into social projects, part owned by the honorary consul. I think he's honorary consul for the British Embassy in Cali, Simon Ford. So he's been very generous with us at this show. So that little Cafe Plus goodie bag, and it can be delivered to any corner of Colombia. So no matter where you're tuning in, we can get it to you. And we'll give away that in about 15 minutes or so. We have a little question. Something related to our news topic. But anyway, Colombian gifts, Ollie, when you think about it, like, are you like me when you go back to England, when I go back to Ireland, like I have to go back with coffee. Even if it's just some crappy Olympica coffee, if I'm short on cash and I just go in and buy the cheap, but there's just something symbolic about going back to Ireland, bringing coffee from here. Yeah, gotta be done.
Yeah, I have to confess, yeah, and often I'm thinking as I buy it, this is actually probably cheaper and better quality Colombian coffee in Tesco's when I get home, but thanks to the bizarre logic of late stage capitalism. My mother drinks better quality Colombian coffee at a cheaper price than me. Don't know how that works out. There you go.
Yeah, well, the wonders of Tesco and Etal supermarkets. Yeah, exactly. But do you have a particular coffee brand that you like to buy here? Because obviously there's so many, and people have said the quality has improved of late. I guess people are demanding better quality.
Well, if I'm going back home, it means I'm giving gifts. So I don't give people the coffee that I drink in my house because, I don't really appreciate properly good coffee. But I usually pop round the corner to Varietale and have a couple of bags of either beans or, already ground coffee to give to family. Because it has nice little stories, and it's got a thing about the farmers and all that sort of thing. It's very artisanal.
Yeah. Okay. I got again my tech books are in the system. I was going to say, for me, one of my favorite gifts. From especially my brothers and brothers-in-law, they like football shirts. So any kind of, not just the Colombian one, obviously, but different clubs and things like that. So I would say easily back in my small little village in Ireland, between brothers and sisters and brothers-in-law and nieces, there's probably at least 20 to 25 Colombian football shirts doing the rounds in various houses, from Nacional to Santa Fe to Millonarios to America de Cali.
Yeah, I bet the Nacional jersey is popular in Ireland.
Yeah, of course, like now, I'm not... What I would like, though, is Cali. I don't feel, because, Nacional is kind of seen as the big rival now, Millos, and Millos being, of course, my team now. But Cali, there's no real Deportivo Cali. There's much rivalry, and I do like that green jersey. Equidad as well, another good jersey, but it's very difficult to get because it's not a popular team.
Plus, also Equidad are on the list of blacklisters.
Oh, okay. But who else was on that list? I know you said on, I forget now. But
Tolima were there. And you wouldn't necessarily associate... I mean, Tolima are run by an absolute tit, but, you kind of... they're not one of the traditional big teams. And it does seem to be kind of more second-level teams. I'm looking for the list now. But yes, here we go.
Go on.
The list of those teams is. I'm just going to pick up the big ones: Cúcuta, Unión Magdalena.
Oh, Cúcuta are in it.
Yeah. Oh, no. Pibe's old team, Unión Magdalena. Pasto, again, the most left-wing city in Colombia by a long way. Surprised to see Pasto on there. Tigres, Envigado, the Oficina de Envigado. Of course, Envigado, famous for generally having youth players, promoting a lot of youth, so not great there. Leones, Fortaleza, Equidad, Quindío, Tolima, Once Caldas, who used to be the team from the smallest town ever to have won the Continental Club Championship.
Of course, yeah.
Fun fact for
you.
Like
2001.
2001, yeah, 2002,
yeah.
Something like that.
So Cúcuta are in, so I'm endorsing one of the blacklisters. Oh, terrible. I do like their jersey, and come on, Cúcuta, like small club. I mean, I wouldn't expect them to be paying big wages anyway. I'd say.
No.
Yeah.
No, but anyway. Other things I like to take back: Cigars, big hit a couple of times for Christmas. The family turns out a lot more people in my family smoke when one's offering out cigars. In a generally non-smoking family, it turns out once there's a cigar being offered around, a lot of them sort of go, "Oh, actually, I do fancy popping out to the garden quickly."
Yeah, well, in fairness, I used to bring back cigarettes for some friends. Just I whisper this, because technically illegal, isn't it? But it was so that they wouldn't have to pay the high prices in Ireland that you pay for cigarettes.
That's night and day,
yeah. Fraction of a price. Well, mentioning kind of drugs, alcohol, I like to bring back the odd beer, like poker, just obviously not because it's of an amazing quality, just to kind of have a bottle of poker beer or a can in the house, that you can kind of leave there somewhere as an ornament once somebody has drunk the thing. I brought back Guaro as well. Again, not because it's excellent, just because it's something Colombian. That's about it. Just to go back to something. Go on.
My mother is very partial to rum as well, Caribbean dark rum. So, in fact, that's a great tip. If you can get hold, it's not always easy in Bogotá, but if you can get hold of Embajador, I think it's called. It's a very good rum from the Costa.
But from Colombia.
Yeah.
Because I got this. Yeah.
Imperator, Embajador. Somebody will write it. It's quite famous.
Okay. Somebody will come up with it.
Excellent.
But if I was going to go through some of those,
excellent rum, but Colombia's ridiculous internal market of alcohol means that it's surprisingly hard to get hold of inside Colombia, unless you're in the place where it's made. Because selling alcohol between departments is notoriously problematic for some reason. I can't remember what it is.
Okay. I just wanted to go through some of the messages that we got in earlier, and I know we had these in our list, but David Allen Simmons said, or Jacob Tom's first, was a well-made sombrero costeña is on his wish list. So that's the sombrero volteado, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, you can get those here in Bogotá too, I take it.
Very easy, very easy.
Mm-hmm. But well-made, quality ones. And then David Allen Simmons is on about a hammock from Zipaquirá. Now, why Zipaquirá? Is Zipaquirá known for its hammocks? I would have, that would have been the last one, not the last place, but not one of the first places to spring to mind for hammocks. But anyway, hammocks, and just checking. Suzu Waju's Ethan Jacob says, what are they the bags?
Yeah, the mochilas. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great cool. And again, I mean, one of the reasons I wouldn't recommend a sombrero volteado is just because it's a bit of a pain moving a hat around. You know, they're quite easy to damage unless you get an enormous hat box. Or, I mean, you can just wear it, but of course, then you have to wear it. So yeah, I don't know that I'd recommend always a hat, but the hammocks are great cool. Or the chinchorros, I think they're called, from up in Guajira, also absolutely spectacular, tassels and everything.
On the kind of clothing there, when we're mentioning that obviously a ruana, poncho, whatever you want to call it, or well, ruana officially.
Yeah.
Another nice gift if you get a well-made one, not a kind of epoxy one. There's a lot of kind of tacky ones doing the rounds. Jacob Thomas as well. I think he mentioned this in terms of gifts. Super cocoa, like because obviously you can bring back under the cocoa sweets, and there's different things. Yeah, so like
Lumo as well is good.
Oh yeah, well, we talked about this when we were planning the show, but in the airport, in the brick shops, even though they are ridiculously expensive, although if you bring a little bag, you could borrow some because they have them in as little. Well, they did pre-pandemic. You could taste them. They were on for sampling, so you could go through these little brick chocolate. They are delicious, but again, like at 40,000 for a 170 gram packet, 40,000 pesos. It's expensive enough in that regard. But yeah, they are rather delicious. But yeah, the cocoa products here, because like there's like cocoa drinks as well. Like, would you ever bring back a Colombiana? Because I know some people. What's the Peruvian drink that's kind of it's got a reputation. It's Peru's Iron Brew. Yeah.
Oh, like Inca Cola?
Inca Cola, yeah. So, Colombiana, isn't it? No, it's just an ordinary.
Or Postobon? No, I couldn't see myself doing that. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Although, I have brought presents back for Colombians in the United Kingdom, and no surprise to know that Chocoramo is top of the list for them.
Yeah, and like if you bring these things back to somebody who doesn't know the history behind them, you'd be kind of going like, yeah, it's just a kind of very plain sweet cake with a bit of chocolate over it. But yeah, you can understand the delight. Now, I have to say, my sister is a big fan of arequipe, dulce de leche, as they call it in Argentina. Now, I guess you can easily get that nowadays in big supermarkets. But you got to remember, I grew up in the west of Ireland. And, you didn't know there wasn't always great variety in the local supermarkets. So that was kind of a novelty. So I tend to go back with arequipe as well. And I know I've shown my sister the mil hojas, so she likes to bake, so she's keen on trying that, but with genuine arequipe sauce from here. Would you go like bocadillos is another thing, the arequipe and bocadillos?
No, you see stuff like that. It's a bit like people coming the other way and bringing cheese, which we talked about. I'm just not a fan of that. Like, it feels to me like something that I want to have refrigerated. And again, I wouldn't really like having, arequipe. I'd be worrying about it melting somewhere along the journey or whatever.
Okay. Well, Pony Malta won't melt. Should be refrigerated though. Jacob Tom mentions that. Would you go back with Pony Malta?
No, there are plenty of places that sell malt drinks in England if you want.
With Christmas coming up, buñuelos, natilla sticking on the food here.
Good luck in keeping a buñuelo fresh, through the hours and hours of travel that you're going through. I can't see that working out.
No, but you can bring back the powder and then make them. So there's that option.
Yeah, okay, I guess you could.
Yeah, so... and the final thing on food, I mentioned at the top of the show, the hormigas culonas. I've tried them, but I've never brought them back to Ireland. Have you? You've tried them, I take it, Ollie, yeah? The big...
Yes, I bought a bag the other day. And that's going to be a treat of the weekend. Santanderiano shop in Chapinero.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, I've taken those back.
But do you like them?
Oh yeah, I love ants. But taking them back in and vegetarian-wise, I feel a lot better eating ants than I do eating sort of mammal meat. But yeah, I've taken them back a few times. It's great fun, especially like with little cousins, any little children that you know, cousins, nephews and nieces. Great fun to give them a dried insect to eat. They love that.
Yeah, but they don't find it gross or anything? Because Richard Stoller, a guy
but children love being grossed out. They're like, oh my god, it's like, yeah, it's fantastic.
I don't know. I think when I was younger, I just would have refused, probably vomited or something. I don't know. I wasn't as hard back then. Jacob Thomasley's on about ceramic personalised teacups. By the way, guys, we are giving away this Cafe Plus coffee. We'll do it in like a minute. And then we haven't got to kind of, we'll say, classier or maybe more profound, or those who want to learn more about Colombia, those kind of gifts in terms of books, be it on nature, politics, whatever. There's a lot in that. So anyway, but what Jacob's saying, personalized teacups, you can usually find a close enough name for everyone in the family.
That's a great. That's a really good cool.
Another kind of on that line, down in San Andercito, a couple of my nephews, when they were younger anyway, loved the wristbands. And even though I guess you can get them in Ireland, but the colourful, all the different ones, and then you could get them with Millonarios and with Nacional and all the different football clubs, or just Colombia. So you go down to San Andercito and they tend to sell them by the dozen. So you can get them worked out about like 200 pesos for each one. Again, I know some people are going to go, no, you should buy them off the proper artisanal makers and things like that. But if one is feeling a bit financially up against the wall, down in San Andercito,
to be honest, a lot of them will be made in factories,
Yeah, a lot of the time, anyway.
I've met quite a lot of people that claim things are handmade, and I think that's exactly identical to something I've seen everywhere from Costa Rica to Chile. But sure, it's handmade. Sure,
handmade in a Chinese factory. Just finally, and then we'll go on to we'll give away our Cafe Plus, and it'll be the first person in, guys. Before we did like the second or third, but the first person in with the correct answer that appears on our screen here. So the first one to text in live. But just quickly, because we mentioned this about the whole Nazis and then put the shoe on the other foot. Buying a Pablo Escobar T-shirt for a big fan of Narcos. I know you wouldn't do it, Ollie, but would you understand if somebody did that? Like if you saw somebody wandering around Bristol when you're home next with a Pablo Escobar T-shirt?
Yeah, I think it was crass, frankly. I can see people doing it. Again, kind of goes back to where we were talking about Nazis earlier, doesn't it? It's a little bit on the crass side, to say the least. Certainly not something I would do. I'd like to think that nobody I know would do it. I could definitely see a lot of people doing it, though.
Okay. David Allenton said enough with Escobar. So then I'll just say the book that really got me more hooked on certain aspects of this country for somebody who likes mafia movies and things like that was the book by Mark Bowden, Killing Pablo. But I would recommend it just to give you a good idea of like that history and like, 'cause, look, you can ignore it, but you're ignoring a crucial element of the country as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, let's get on with
yeah.
Go on. Sorry.
It's also a pretty fast-reading book. I'm against some of the militaristic, whoop, hey, yeah, America is awesome, man, undertones to it. But I agree with you. I think it's a good, gripping book.
And another book I'll mention after we do the quiz, which I also highly recommend, again, to give you a good idea of the politics around that period. But, Ollie, do you want to give the question? And fingers at the ready, folks. Get your hands on top of the keyboard. First person to send in the correct answer.
It's a nice, simple one. It's going to reward anybody who's been listening from the start. So, the simple question to win yourself a goodie bag of coffee is simply, who will be the Centro Democrático candidate in the Colombian presidential elections next year? We just need one of his first names and one of his surnames will be enough. We don't need a full name.
And we won't deduct. There we go.
There we go. Although we may have to disqualify people not living in Colombia. Can we get coffee outside of the country?
Well, the thing is, if Ethan has a friend here, which he said you can donate it. Well, if Ethan, if you have a friend who you'd like to give it to, send it our way. Because I mean, the rules are the rules. He was first in, and David Allen Simmons. You should have just looked at the message previously because he's no shit. I didn't know, but I'm sure Ethan has a friend. So look, first in. First past the post, so we got to give it to him.
We've got to.
These friends you speak of. We'll be in touch. I think Ethan's probably writing off the Bogotá Post Facebook page, so Ollie will send a private message and we'll get that sorted out. So anyway, congrats, guys.
Friends? Yeah.
Oscar Zuluaga, of course. Oscar Ivan Zuluaga Escobar, to give him his full name. So will we have another Ivan back? I was going to say in the White House. In the
Angela's shortened his name to OIZ, which makes him sound weirdly kind of Yiddish. You imagine OIZ.
Well, anyway, I was going to mention the other book before we go. So David Allen Simmons, this isn't about Escobar. It's about the basically systematic destroying of a political movement, the Unión Patriótica, Walking Ghosts, Murder and Guerrilla Politics in Colombia by Stephen Dudley. I read that book again, another fascinating read. You get the backstory of the, what's his name, Carlos his name, the Paraco.
Carlos
Castaño, yes. Just fascinating, and they said the systematic, basically eliminating of that party or political movement. So well worth checking that out. I mean, there's new ones. What's that one? About the Rio Magdalena by.
That's been very.
I haven't. Yeah, but it's been well received.
Yeah.
Did you get? And have you read from your fellow English woman, co-author, Colombia Comedy of Errors? I'm still waiting for I'm still waiting for my complimentary copy. You see,
I have flicked through it. I would also recommend, actually, if you can get hold of it, this book here.
Come on, Ollie, come on.
I can't quite reach it. Hold on a second.
Digging into Sandra's sack. Well, that was another book, which is not specifically Colombian, but tales that.
There we go.
Okay.
Voices of Bogotá. It's quite a good little anthology collection of short stories focused on Bogotá. In the world.
Okay. Well, when we're on about books, although this is in Spanish, so you'd have to have decent Spanish, but Malcolm Díaz's Intercambios de Violencia, There's different stories about violence in Colombia and compared and with other countries and things. It's quite an interesting book. This idea that Colombia is the most violent, blah 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 blah. So kind of dissect some of those thoughts with facts and figures. Interesting book. Anyway, I don't know if our producer is sleeping, but we have gone over the hour mark. Apologies once again, guys, for my dodgy internet connection from time to time, but that's what we're dealing with. Strato Tres kind of stuff here. Anyway, next week we will be back. Enjoy your Noche de Velitas, guys, on the 7th. Remember, the 8th is a holiday here. So have some good fun. Be careful if you're using fireworks. My recommendation would be not to use them. And Ollie, we shall talk in a week.
Oye nocho. Goodbye.
Oye nocho. Ciao, ciao. Bye, guys.